But what has been tragic in the last little while is the confirmation that 2 lives have been lost. There are at least 7 people unaccounted for, and I'm sorry to say that number can increase during the day. Our thoughts and prayers, of course, go to the families and loved ones of those 2 deceased persons. I'll ask the Commissioner to provide further details on that. But we do need to brace ourselves, and what is concerning is that the forecast weather conditions on Tuesday could mean that we're not through the worst of it. Whilst this situation is so severe, I have such full confidence in our volunteers and emergency services personnel on the ground. There are now over 1,300 people on the ground to protect communities against these fires. The vast majority of those are volunteers, and I want to thank each and every person who's literally putting their own life on the line to protect the life and property of others. I also want to thank other states for sending us their personnel, because we know that once our volunteers go through a couple of shifts, they're exhausted, and we do rely on fresh volunteers to support us, and I want to thank the other states for the support they've provided. We are seeing a situation in New South Wales with these fires we've not seen before, and of course concerns remain mainly around the Glen Innes area, but also Port Macquarie and Taree regions and the townships around those communities. Again, I want to thank the Commissioner, I want to thank our ACS personnel, I want to thank our police and all of the emergency services on the ground for the incredible work they're doing. And I also say to all the people of New South Wales, thank you for your support, but please know that we may not be through the worst of it, but also please know that we have the resources, the equipment and the personnel to make sure we do everything we can to protect life and community. But we also need to appreciate, and I please urge everybody to listen to the messages you're getting. I just had a briefing from the Commissioner and received assurances that our communication systems are the best they've ever been. Please heed to the warnings. If you're concerned, please make sure you contact the relevant authorities to get the advice and information you need. The situation is beyond serious, but I also know that we have the best people and the best resources to do everything they can to protect our community. Minister?
Yep. Thanks, Premier. I think the first message today is of gratitude and thanks to the 1,300 professional volunteer firefighters that are out on the fire line today. It is essential that communities do what they request you to do when you're confronting a fire. It is important for you to, if you are out of contact with your loved ones or authorities, to make sure that you use social media to ensure that your safety and well-being is registered. But 1,300 firefighters today will be putting their lives on the line to make sure that our communities are safe. They are, I'm confident, as the Premier said, the best resourced that we possibly can. Remember, this is the largest volunteer firefighting service in the world, New South Wales RFS. The aviation assets we've been able to provide them this year, thanks to a good budget, means that they've got the 737 LAT, the LAT, which is dumping 15,000 litres of water every time it goes on a mission. That is being replenished within 9 minutes. These are the type of capabilities that we've just never had before. But that doesn't mean the community is out of danger. In fact, as the Premier said, next week will be a bad week. There is no sugarcoating that. I also need to make sure that the community is aware that we have the professional firefighters out on deployment today as well. 200 from Fire and Rescue. We're very grateful for the work that they're doing and the fact that most of them have probably come in to do shifts that they're on leave for. But when you go back to those 1,300 volunteers, you know, they're actually protecting their own communities. So it's one thing when you go out as a volunteer firefighter to put a fire out, but some of them are actually having their own homes at risk at the moment, and they've walked away from protecting their own homes to protect the homes of those that they may not even know. It's important to also acknowledge the role of the police force. The South Australian government has made an offer to the people of New South Wales to provide resources as well, and as the Commissioner I'm sure will be able to advise, we have liaison officers already in place from international assistance out of New Zealand, California and Canada. I'll now hand over to Commissioner Fitzsimmons, who will have a lot of the statistics that you'll need to be aware of.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Premier. As indicated, we still have more than 70 fires burning across New South Wales. and 39 of those remain uncontained. As we speak, 5 of them continue to burn at emergency warning level, but given the circumstances forecast for today, which is a continuance of dry, windy conditions across an already very dry landscape, there's every likelihood that we'll see fires increase in their alert level and be adjusted throughout the day as the fire behaviour increases and the risk changes to different communities. Sadly, we have confirmed, as the Premier's identified this morning, the remains of someone were found in a vehicle on a fire near Glen Innes, and the police are now dealing with the forensic process of that scene and the formal identification. And we've just heard in briefing the Premier and the Minister in only a matter of minutes ago that a member of the community who was treated on scene last night for several hours. They came into an area and found somebody badly burnt. The reports were initially of 40 to 50% of burns to her body. She was also unconscious, and the crews were rendering first aid and CPR for several hours, I understand, prior to the arrival and intervention of medical specialists. Despite the very best efforts of all involved, we are advised this morning that lady has passed away in hospital as a result of her injuries and her condition in the last 24 hours. We are looking at 7 people that are not accounted for, and as the Premier has quite rightly indicated, we are expecting that number to climb today. That is not necessarily a number for alarm, but we can't rule out the really grave concerns that there could be more losses or indeed more fatalities as we get through and identify details across these fire grounds. We have promoted very much the idea of people registering their location and registering their interest if they're not able to locate loved ones. So we are tracking that information, but we are hopeful that so many of them will be resolved with a positive outcome. But clearly, given the enormity of the occasion and the events of yesterday, and already some of the compelling information that's coming from these fire grounds, we need to be attuned to the fact that we could see more casualty and more loss as the details unfold. Across the fire grounds yesterday, as the Premier and the Minister have indicated, it was unprecedented for New South Wales to have so many fires burning at the emergency warning alert level. 17 concurrent fires were burning at the emergency warning alert level yesterday, and another 9 at the same time were burning at watch and act alert level, which were a number of fires out of a total of 99 burning across New South Wales at that point in time. Of those emergency warning fires, that's an indication that people, that property were being absolutely impacted or imminently impacted by all of those fires at the same time. There was a huge focus and a desperate focus to try and get firefighters, aircraft, emergency services to as many people in need as possible. But the reality is, and we've heard 000 calls, we've heard messages to our control centres, messages to our information line, that many people were calling in indicating that they were trapped or isolated and felt uncomfortable or frightened with what was surrounding them, but we simply couldn't get people, firefighters, aircraft or resources into some of these communities, and it took many hours to even make it through. And I'm sure you've seen some of the dramatic footage of the fire events impacting different communities, and of course some of the footage that's been screened with fire crews driving through some pretty hostile environments trying to reach people and to reach property and save and protect as much as they possibly could. The preliminary reports coming out from across the fire grounds indicate that at least 100 homes are destroyed, and that's without even getting to all of the fire grounds overnight. We've got impact assessment teams that will go out more forensically looking at all these areas when they can safely access the areas, but we need to be prepared for that number of homes, that number of properties to climb, and I suspect climb fairly significantly once we start getting better intelligence out of the damaged areas. It's not just about homes and property, of course, as valuable and precious as one's home is. We're also seeing reports and evidence of pretty significant community infrastructure being damaged, with reports of a school being destroyed, lots of bridges, lots of infrastructure, power infrastructure, telecommunications infrastructure, all those sorts of things being damaged and or destroyed. The conditions yesterday that brought about these 17 emergency warning fires burning concurrently, we saw some of the weather conditions, some of the fire danger ratings exceeding what was forecast, and indeed being some of the worst recorded on record in those parts of New South Wales, particularly across areas like Glen Innes, Ballina, Armidale and Grafton, where we saw some of the highest ratings being achieved before we even hit lunchtime. It is a sobering reminder of what's around the corner. As the Premier and the Minister have indicated, we've got some time between now and the beginning of next week where firefighters will be doing their absolute utmost to try and consolidate and secure as much of this fire as they possibly can, but the reality is they simply won't contain these fires. We are going to be going into another bad weather day on Tuesday, a weather day that would be somewhat akin to what we saw yesterday, but unfortunately it's expected to be across a much broader geographic area of New South Wales, with fire danger ratings up into severe and extreme, extending not just through the northeast and northern parts of the state, but potentially out through the central west, across the Greater Sydney, Illawarra region and down into parts of the south coast. So we are very mindful of what's around the corner in the next coming days. I would echo the comments of the Premier and the Minister and simply say a sincere thank you and appreciation to the efforts of all involved, the men and women who are putting it all on the line to save their community, to save communities that they're visiting and helping colleagues in trying to fight those fires with. And also, not just people across New South Wales, but also our interstate colleagues. I think the figure I'm up to now is something like 700 or 800 people have been engaged from interstate and New Zealand over the last couple of weeks with these fires, and they're continuing to provide that support, and we're firming up those requests for continuing support over the coming days and weeks. Not only is it about next week, but unfortunately the forecast for the balance of this season continues to be driven by above normal temperatures, below average rainfall to dominate over the coming months. You put that across this extremely drought-stricken landscape where you've got no moisture in the ground, you've got no moisture in the fuel, you've got a flammability of the fuel which is seeing extraordinary fire behaviour, fires starting extremely quickly, spreading and burning very intensely, very aggressively, very quickly, with spot fire activity doubling or tripling what would normally be expected under the sorts of fire conditions we've been experiencing, because the flammability, the lack of moisture in the vegetation is making it so susceptible to ignition that many embers landing well ahead of the main fire front are readily taking hold, starting new fires and rapidly accelerating the movement of fire across the landscape and into different communities. The risk is real, the risk is here, the consequences are absolutely apparent and evident over the last few weeks, and particularly highlighted in the last 24 hours. We have got the worst of our fire season still ahead of us. We're not even in summer yet. We've still got weeks ahead before we hit summer, which is traditionally our worst time of the year. We need to emphasise, we cannot emphasise enough, the criticality of all people who live, work or choose to holiday in bushfire-prone areas across New South Wales this season to be prepared, to have that bushfire survival plan, have a conversation with your family and loved ones, know your risk, accept your risk, deal with that risk, prepare your home, prepare your property, prepare your family. The little things you do now, the little investments you do now could make all the difference if you're impacted by fire this season. Most importantly, if you do see fire, experience fire, know how you're going to act, know how you're going to act in accordance with that bushfire survival plan, stay up to date, stay informed and be ready to act in accordance with guidance and instruction and messaging that we delivered from the fire services throughout the balance of this season. I would also echo the comments and thank the government for their record investment into fire and emergency services. We made a case to the government, given the extending fire seasons here in New South Wales in the last 18 months. We are the only jurisdiction in this country that's had the benefit of a government to invest in our owned dedicated large air tanker, and since its arrival here in July, it simply hasn't stopped. The last time I looked at it, it was well over 100 missions, well over 1.7 millions of litres of product being delivered across fire grounds. And so far this season, we've seen something like 6,000 fires burning across New South Wales. And as we speak, the area burnt by those fires and continuing to be burnt today by the fires across New South Wales is nearly 3 times the entire area burnt last season across all of New South Wales, and yet the greatest concentration of fire we've had this year is in the northeastern part of the state. It's a sobering reminder that the worst of our season is here, and we plead with everybody to be prepared and ready to act ahead of this season.